Hey guys, so today we are going to talk about the Orient, Oriental and the Occidental through the movie A Passage to India by David Lean, which was adapted through A Passage to India, the novel by E.M. Forster. Orientalism is an ideological hotspot from where single stories originate. It is the Westerner's perspective of the East, a geographical entity starkly different to theirs. In other words, it is an attempt of the West to describe the East in the most comprehensible manner to their own kind. Edward Said, in his book Orientalism, dives deeper into this understanding. He states that rather than the longitudes and latitudes, the epistemological and occidental differences play a major role in the process of defining and thereby othering the East. And this is what we are going to use to describe A Passage to India by David Lean. If you benefit from what I'm about to tell you, and if you want to hear more content like this more often, do comment, like, and subscribe. So David Lean's movie, A Passage to India by E.M. Forster, caters to this notion by drawing an unambiguous contrast between the average Indian and the Englishman. The differences between the Oriental and the Occidental, respectively, go beyond their contrasting skin color. To what extent faith, knowledge, opinion, and cultures of the East and the West are conflicting is to be noted throughout the movie. East is East, Mrs. Moore, it's a question of culture. This statement by Mrs. Turton is a strong foretelling of what Mrs. Moore and Adela are to expect as they set foot on India. The Indians' attire, food, mannerisms, and lifestyle seem inferior to the Englishman equipped with a Eurocentric view. The English sleep on beds in perfect replicas of British households, while the Indians lay on the ground out in the open air. This is seen in the very few scenes of the movie. Whereas the European sits at a table, uses his cutlery, and sips his tea, the Indian sits on the ground and eats from his hands. Constant references to profession and marriage, to defining factors of Indian success, are not viewed in the same light by the British. Beliefs in destiny and reincarnation presented by Godbole are silently discarded as nonsensical. Completely denying or misinterpreting these facts, the English hastily label the Indian as uncivilized, lustful, irrational, and violent. When the British conclude the darker race is attracted to the fairer and not vice versa, and that the brown man with the white woman cannot be trusted, their vulnerability and fear of the unknown is highlighted. According to Said, it is a mean of mirroring the deepest fears of one's self through the other. This is exactly why the traditional Indian is viewed as effeminate by the colonizer, merely because he wears loincloths and mascara. They view the incomprehensible in a more feminine light in an attempt to feel less threatened. However, these pessimistic deductions push the Orient and Orientals further away as incompatible entities. In the climax of the story, all these defining factors of the dangerous Indian work against Aziz, who is initially viewed as least threatening and most trustworthy. In accordance, the native is stripped of his free will and made a spectacle to be laughed at and stepped upon. Ronnie, the city magistrate, is the perfect representation of the majority of the West. India isn't a drawing room. We are here to do civil service, justice, and peace, is the philosophy he lives by. This colonial mindset of soaring over the colonized comes with a state-assigned justification of civilizing the primitive. The relationship between Occident and Orient is a relationship of power, of domination, of varying degrees of a complex hegemony, says Said. How Orientalism thereby marginalizes the native is symbolical from the point where the English looks down at the masses from a balcony upon arrival. Indians make way for the British on roads. Indians are not allowed within the territories of their own country. The play within the movie is symbolical of how the Indian stage is taken over by the British. As depicted at the Malabar Caves, the Indians are made to follow the lead of the British in their own ground. This general discrimination is openly questioned by Muhammad Ali, a representative of the literate Indian community. How is England justifying holding India? Qualified Indians also need jobs. We see how the general explanation of the Indian is in reality very subjective. One cannot tell anyone anything until he is ready to hear it. This richness of philosophy and rationality that Godbole offers, and his ability to foresee Mrs. Moore's death, are spellbinding and inexplicable. This makes the viewer aware of how petty a generalization the British drew of the Indian man. However, not merely the colonizer, but the colonized too engage in othering. The Englishman never misses a train. They all become the same at the end. They are big eaters. These utterances and Hussey's misunderstanding the best intentions of Fielding suggest that single stories are common to both parties. As much as the West do not understand the psychological downfall of Aziz, his loss of honor, how the exposure of his sacred belongings affect him, etc., the East too fail to comprehend how the echo psychologically affects in the hallucinations of Adela. For Aziz, she is simply a fresh girl out of Britain who had too much sun. In this manner, we see how the negative effects of Orientalism affect both the East and the West. To the colonial mind, the deprivation of the Orient was a subconscious plea to be saved by the West, says Donahue. Said comments on the successive outcomes of this belief, the superior West subjecting the masses to westernization. The characterization of Aziz is built around this denotation. He is a Western-educated doctor. His tolerance of the Englishman, internalizing Orientalism in an attempt to impress the white, his attire and home being familiar to that of the English, and his inferiority complex show the plight of the victim. What is most unfortunate is Aziz being aware of this invisible hand and yet somehow accepting his subservient role. Similar characteristics are seen in Daz, the deputy magistrate. You and I are both servants. This agitated declaration of Ali the lawyer sums up this deep-rooted hold of the West. However, the role reversals towards the end of the movie suggest the gradual downfall of the British Empire. Though Mrs. Moore's death suggests the death of justice at one point, it is symbolical of the death of the empire, which is often associated with the image of a woman. It is ironical how the Western-educated Daz takes control of the trial and steadily gains power while the English perspires, aware of their impending loss. Amrit Rao's biography, Anti-British, a Political Challenge, parted the freedom movement, to account for this sudden upliftment. The court of the British is taken over by the masses of Indians who barge in to celebrate victory. This power reversal is another result of the self-projection or mirroring that Said talks of, a byproduct of westernization that creates potential equals among the other. I'm an Indian at last. Aziz's massive transformation from subservient to an Indian hero that wins over the West is exemplary. It is important to note how his elevation in society begins once he cuts ties with the British. This is highlighted in his note to Adela, thanking her for freeing him of his imprisonment. In parallel to the power hunger of the West, true interest and longing to see the real India is another area Said focuses on. Adela and Mrs. Moore are disgusted by the bridge party organized to bridge the gap between the nations. In reality, it is one of many ways of discrimination, where the English tower over the Indians standing below the bridge. Instead, they are fascinated by the mysteries and novelty of this culture. They disassociate themselves from the colonizer to an extent bringing with them a sense of equality. However, Said's anti-colonialist perspective of Orientalism is expressed in this context. That is why, however much she tries, Adela fails in her attempt of comprehending. She does not have the capacity to see what Said concludes. The world is made of two unequal halves. Her collapse at Malabar is foreshadowed in a prior visit to the ruins, where she tries to enter a temple, yet the monkeys do not allow her. Similarly, the barriers faced by Fielding and Mrs. Moore in assisting Aziz are reminiscent of how the Occidental and the Oriental can never mingle in agreeable terms. Said's conclusion here is that Orientalism is a fictitious creation of the West. Therefore, all attempts to comprehend the Oriental fails because the Orient itself is non-existent. The final scenes of the movie are presented with elevated music and a serene view of the Himalayan mountains, showcasing the true grandeur of India as opposed to the demeaning viewpoint of India by the West. As the brothers, Aziz and Fielding, part ways to never meet again, the concluding message of Forster as well as Said is that complete elimination of political and cultural boundaries is the single mean of making the West and the East see eye to eye. With that ends my reading on A Passage to India, the movie by David Lean. If you would like to hear from me more often, do like and subscribe. Thank you.